Welcome to a football show, Monday edition. That is Paul Kuharsky. I am Braden Gall. And of course, we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages. There's the logo right there on the shirt and on the hat today. And of course, you can see that logo right over Paul's head from his home offices. And of course, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, the best brisket in the city. All right, lots of stuff to get to today. There is the Titans have flooded the zone with a lot of digital interviews with about 10 different, maybe 11 different candidates for their general manager job, air quotes there on the GM job. We sort of know who's going to be in charge. So we'll go through that. The playoffs over the weekend, Paul, we're not, I'm a Packers fan. Obviously, yesterday was a big bummer for my girls in the house, but in general, not a great weekend for action. Mike Vrabel.
College football week.
Yeah, that's true. Settle down. Mike Vrabel has been rehired and is constructing his dream team in New England as he wanted to do here. What does it all tell us? What does it all mean, PK? And then, of course, the general manager who was recently fired by the professional NFL football team in the market went on the flagship radio station of that team, not more than a week after he had been fired, to talk about Drake, I guess. So we'll talk about all these things today on the show. And, of course, special thanks to Sinkers Beverages and to Shotgun Willie's Barbecue for making us free and available to all of you. You're already in the comment section. I see all of you. I know Daniel Frazier doing some reporting out there on the Twitter streets about what took place in that interview. So we got a lot of stuff to get to, and we'll discuss all of the things that have transpired over the course of the last week. I got to start. Paul, how weird is what Ran Carthon decided to do this morning on 104.5 The Zone with Kayla Anderson and Ramon Foster, just in general, before we get into the actual conversation around the interview itself. I saw the announcement and I just thought, okay, fine, good get, way to go on the radio station to get him, the show itself. But isn't it my first thought was like, dude, they have NDAs. They have there's things he can't talk about because he's, there's a reason Vrabel hasn't talked in a year. How weird was this when you saw that they were going to have a long form sit down in studio interview with the guy they fired on the flagship radio station of the team that just fired him?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I heard the announcement. I heard it from you, actually. Hey, looks like we'll be talking a lot about this. I don't think we'll be talking a lot about it because he didn't say anything. And he didn't say anything largely because he wasn't asked anything. I mean, if you want to update your playlists and your reading list, well, you got some good recommendations from Ran Carthon if you drive the same lanes. Otherwise, there's really nothing there except a clear misunderstanding by all three of them of the message versus the messenger. Without naming me, they said I don't know him, so I couldn't possibly know what he does on a plane or at a pro day, which is just a really a large scale problem in a major market that A, the GM fired, and B, the two interviewers don't understand that I'm not saying that Ran Carthon was asleep on planes and it bothered people. And I'm not saying that Ran Carthon left Will Levis's pro day early and it bothered people. People who worked with him are telling me that. And look, I'm a little bit of a polarizing figure. I get that. But I think most people would agree when it comes to facts regarding the Tennessee Titans. Since 1996, I've brought you facts about the team, and multiple people. And since I wrote that story, people have said, thank you for writing that. So they can pretend like it's a cute thing between me and him, but it's not. It's stuff that people have told me about him, and that none of the three of them care to get the fact that these are work colleagues who were put off by how he conducted himself at work. It's very disturbing. I don't know how many major markets you would get that in. I really don't. It's incredibly disappointing. So they had a chuckle over that. And besides that, one little foray into that, I don't think they touched on one bit of things that qualify as news. So it was really a pointless exercise.
Yeah. So I see this sort of as I see it sort of as a reporter trying to get information out of an individual who's a key character in an important story. And then I also see it as sort of like an old school radio personality as well. And I sort of see a lot of different sides of this. And I reached out to I reached out to both, just in the interest of full disclosure. I reached out to Kayla and Ramon and said, look, I there's things I would have done differently. It's a tough situation in general because you're putting the guy clearly can't talk about certain things. He can't say certain things.
You have to ask him. You have to ask him and have him not saying.
And so ultimately you do have to ask, which is my one area of critique. I'll give them credit for this. I think Kayla asked, she got 4 of the main topics in a question. Now, I don't necessarily, would I have worded them differently? Maybe. But she asked about Mike Vrabel being hired. She asked about Brian Callahan. She asked about Will Levis, and she asked about drafting, what he thinks of the draft in the quarterbacks. Now, to his credit, Ran Carthon, I think he came off very well if you were looking for someone to just kind of do some image rehab. I know he couldn't say a lot of things, and he could have gone low road on a few topics. He chose not to. He stayed up here, which to me is he's not really saying anything. But they did ask about those 4 topics. Chad Brinker was not asked. And according to an interaction that our guy, Daniel Frazier, had, look at our audience doing some reporting on Twitter for us. Daniel Frazier asked Kayla a question on Twitter about no questions about Brinker, none at all. And her response to him, this is all public, it said, there are things that could not be discussed. And
well, you got to say that on the front end.
100%.
You can't say
100%.
an answer to a Twitter question after the fact.
I agree. And then it raises the question, like, why have the interview? Now, this is the problem with our media ecosystem to some degree. I understand the radio station saying, hell yeah, take the interview, because you're going to get numbers out of it, even if it's disappointing, because I think it's disappointing for the fans, not for like me as a radio person. Would I have asked a tougher question or maybe worded a question differently? Like, sure, I know Rand's not going to give you any answers. But yeah, so Cottage
Rand
says,
didn't give any answers, by the way, when he held the position. So it's not a surprise that Rand didn't give any answers when he didn't hold the position.
Well, and so ultimately, one of my favorite moments of the entire thing in the chat, because the chat was, it's a chat. I love you guys in the chat, but sometimes in the middle of a conversation with a particular person in this story, you got to be careful. And one of my favorite lines was about 35 or 40 minutes into the conversation. I saw a comment in the chat that's like, man, I really appreciate that he did this. I'm glad I got to know him. And I'm like, you had 2 years on the job, Rand, to try to teach people and get to know folks and be available and have these conversations. I just thought that was very telling that a Titans fan who was sort of on his side was saying, look, I'm just so glad I get to know him now. And I'm like,
he got to know him by learning what he's reading and what he's listening to. I mean, how deep was that, getting to know him? I mean,
it was not very deep.
Very peripherally get to know him. Congratulations, you're best boys now.
It's just so weird, man. It's just so weird. Like, I agree with you. I didn't hear anything that he said that gives us any insight. Again, I think they asked him about 4 of the questions that you probably needed to ask, but there's probably about 3 or 4 more. I wanted to know about Vrabel, but I don't care about what Rand thinks about Vrabel going to New England. I want to know about what part of the like the question I would have asked is like sort of like, well, what part of the relationship in your mind, now that you think back on it, didn't work out between you and Mike? Like, that's the kind of question that he should be allowed to answer that's not off limits from an NDA. And that's the kind of question that hopefully he leans into. If not, it's his choice to not answer it.
How did 2023 personnel decisions go down?
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't disagree. So, look, I do think he is there any part of you that thinks he could have gone, not on your particular topic, because you're the only topic he didn't go low road on. He didn't go high road on. Have you been invited to many general managers' houses in general, like across the board?
No, yeah. So you don't know him if you haven't been to his home. So who knows him? I mean, Ian Rappaport knows him. He knows Ian Rappaport's kids' names. Ian Rappaport did cartwheels to brag about that at the first combine after he was hired. Now, I don't know if Ian Rappaport's been to his home, though. So I think right away he's talking out of 2 sides of his mouth about who knows him, who he feels like knows him, who he feels like trusts him, who he feels like he trusts. I don't care anymore. I don't think he did good work. I think he was particularly horrific with the media. And again, I'll say, like, I don't know that they handled this whole thing right. I don't know the right people are in and the right people are out. I think they got rid of a not strong link, and I don't begrudge them that.
How do you think the team, like, who won from all of this? Because, like, Rand, while he comes off as sort of a, like taking the high road on some topics, he's not burning down bridges. That's probably illegal.
Who burns bridges after they're fired in the NFL?
Right. That's illegal.
And John Robinson hasn't spoken to anyone ever. Mike Vrabel emerged on, a Barstool podcast and did some funny stuff and held the press conference today that was very similar to his press conference when he took over here 7 years ago. But I mean, there's not a lot of public bridge burning that goes on in the NFL.
I mean, so I guess ultimately, what were some of the questions you would have asked if you had ran public setting right now in a live situation? What are the things that you would want to know about, knowing full well that there's a bunch of them he probably won't answer?
If you think your work ethic was excellent, why do so many people in the organization and who have left the organization disagree? Why is there such a widespread perception that you did not set that tone? And what kind of agenda would those people have? Some of them no longer with the organization, some of them relieved within the organization. How was the work? How was the personnel operation divvied up in 2023? Are some of those guys yours? Are some of those guys Mike's? Would you say you reached a consensus on all of them when you were ordered to be collaborative? How difficult, he's not going to say how difficult was Mike to work with, but that's obviously what got Mike fired. How would it feel like for Brinker to get, within a year, kind of usurp you? How much was Chad a voice in personnel, and did he overrule you despite you having, or did you put your foot down and say, no, we're taking this guy when there were different opinions there? I mean, all these questions are obvious. He's not going to have that conversation. That's why I think it's a mistake to go do something like that today, because I think most hardcore fans thought, oh, he's coming out, I'm going to get the answer to some of these things, and then go away having gotten nothing of that and feel like what more disappointed than they were before it started.
I think that's ultimately where I came down on this, is like, just if I'm a diehard Titans fan, which I am not, but if I'm a fan of the team, I'm sort of just watching that going like, man, I didn't learn anything. I don't have any better understanding about who you are and why you did or didn't like, what happened in the job. I didn't get any answers I was looking for. And I think that's not even necessarily like Ramon and Kayla's fault. Like, it's a tough situation. It's a tricky situation, which again, many people can say, don't take the interview then. But I also understand
if they're going to say after the fact on Twitter that we couldn't ask this and we couldn't ask that, then you got to be upfront about it and not leave people asking about it. But these are kind of radio things that the Zone, I think, has gone away from since it had better, more pointed interviewers working there, and more straightforward interviewers, quite frankly, working there. And that's I don't know. They might be insulted if I say that. That's a cheerleading show. That is a cheerleading show, the morning show there. And that's not an insult. That's the fact.
All right. So Football Fred's raised a couple of good questions here that I think you and I have covered over the years. First one is, why cover the Titans if you're not a diehard? So number one, businesses and media outlets hire people to cover a team to do a job for a paycheck. I'm not sure if he understands jobs and paychecks and
I cover the
bills
team
and stuff.
To divulge information and to analyze what the team is doing. If you want cheerleader information, there are plenty of outlets at which you can find it. What we're all trying to do is differentiate ourselves. I think I've differentiated myself the longest because I've been around the longest. And the media's changed a great deal since 1996. Once upon a time, I was just a straight-laced reporter, reporting things with no opinion entailed. People don't really want that anymore, and there's not a lot of room for it anymore. But I think you get the most news out of me that you get out of anybody locally, and splashed with honest assessment of what that news means. This idea that you want it only from people who are fans of the team, well, you can go get it from people who are only fans of the team. I don't know what you're doing here.
No, I completely agree. Like, it to me, and I'm not picking on you, Fred. I mean, I want to, but I'm not trying to pick on you. But it is a fundamental misunderstanding of the job. is what that is, because there are people who work for teams. Brooks Bratton for the Nashville Predators. There are people who work for the Titans, Amy Wells and formerly Mike Keith and Dave McGinnis, people who work for the Titans who will give you Homer content from inside the organization. And they're going to have great insights on certain things that those of us outside of the business, outside of the building, do not have.
But why do you think that now? They're just 3-14. They're a mess. If you want cheerleader content, the cheerleaders have to really stretch for it right now. And that's why you're here, frankly.
I tend to agree. And if you'd like to respond to his first comment about how he basically said it's a disgusting article you wrote about Carthon, you should be ashamed. So I don't know.
What was the rest of that? Leave it up for a second. I didn't see
all right. Okay. He said,
I do not make it the level he made it to by being lazy. Come on, man. Well, I never use the word lazy. You're using the word lazy.
True.
I said that there are a lot of people who question the work ethic and the tone that he set for them. And how I wrote that article is people I believe and trust who I know have work ethic question his work ethic. So that's how I wrote it. So I have no discomfort writing it. That's how confident I am in what people told me.
And again, I've said this to other folks as well.
He did get fired, by the way, in 2 years. So are you going to believe what they said about him at the beginning, or are you going to believe what's being said about him at the end?
Well, and I said this on the show with Nick, so I should say it to you just to make sure I'm clear on this. Like, I don't ever question or doubt any of the information's veracity that you report. I think we can, as a group, have a conversation about how important some of the anecdotes actually are in terms of deciding if he's a grinder or not. I think, to your point, the insight from those inside the building working around him saying that is the most important element of all of this. What is a plane or a pro day? And I don't know. It's hard to tell. And I think if I'm trying to play devil's advocate, that might be the only area where I say I don't know if that tells us he's a bad general manager or not.
Were important to the people who were witnessing them, and they're just two examples. A long list I have that people were like, "No, you cannot report X, Y, and Z. You can report these two."
Oh, there's plenty of that, and by the way, the stuff that you cannot report, it's not just about. It's about every subject that's ever been covered. Like, people have good and bad stories about everybody in sports that you cover on the beat that you know and hear, and maybe even have confirmed to some degree that you can't necessarily run with. That's just sort of how the sport works. That's how all sports media works.
And he kind of reiterated this morning about, being friends with these guys. Is that the most important factor in a general manager, that he's buddies with the guys? I mean, Floyd Reese, who's the best general manager the Titans had, was friendly with players, but he also kept a distinct line between we use upstairs and downstairs because a lot of buildings have executive offices upstairs and a locker room downstairs. The Titans had that for a long time. Now everybody's downstairs, but we still say upstairs and downstairs. And I do think that there's an important division between upstairs and downstairs, where it's more a business relationship than it is a friendship ultimately. And I think Rand blurs that line to, frankly, an unhealthy degree. Now he's friends with all of these guys now because he hasn't gotten to the point 4 years deep where you start cutting them because their talent fades, or you start not renewing their contracts because they haven't played up to it. And it would have been a fascinating thing to see how much more difficult those moves became and how they were received by players who thought, "Hey, Rand, you're like my dad. We had conversations where you're my brother or my uncle or my second father figure," which I think is the reason that most GMs don't seek to be don't seek relationships that cast them in those roles.
Ed says the real question is, do we think Rand got fired because of what was reported, or was that anecdotal? Rand Carthon did not get fired because of what was reported. Like, I don't understand that the timeline. The timeline doesn't even line up.
No. The story didn't get him fired, but I think some of the issues that were brought to light in the story are part of the reason why he's no longer the general manager of the Tennessee Titans.
I think Sam asked a legitimate question. I think if you're a smart Titans fan, you could go online and kind of get swayed by the narrative that developed last week. Fans are confused because there's not been a clear reason for his firing. If you look at acquisitions, it's mostly plus. I think we could debate that. This was a rebuild, and then you hear this stuff in the background. Sam, I would disagree. As I said on Thursday, I feel very comfortable saying I think he was let go because he wasn't doing a great job. Like, that's it. I don't think it's more complicated. I don't think it's personal. I don't think he was doing a good job. And I don't think many of the moves that you're referring to, while they look good on paper at the time, none of them have worked out. None of them have helped the team get better. Everything has gotten worse. And I think if you package that with this picture that's been painted by everyone in the building about what was going on, it seems very simple. I don't think it's complicated. And it's not. And I do understand this because I've been fired from a job before. I do understand that when you are no longer doing the thing, it's personal for you. But if it's just that you didn't do a good job, it's not personal at that point. Like if a player has a pass interference penalty or drops passes, and we go on the air and say, so and so needs to catch that pass, that's not personal. You just didn't do your job, and this is what the NFL is all about. So
2023 was judged a disaster at 6 wins. They went out and made what were regarded to be significant personnel gains, and they won half as many games. And I think Mike Herndon wrote a really good piece at paulkuharsky.com last week at my place saying, they got to stop towing this line between like, we're going to rebuild and be competitive at the same time, which I will admit the first time they did it,
it worked
2 years ago, I thought, well, why can't they try to do this? Why is that such a bad thing? National people were saying that, and I thought, why can't they try if they've still got Ryan Tannehill, who, hadn't fallen off the table at that point, and Derrick Henry, and DeAndre Hopkins, and Jeffrey Simmons. They still had pieces that I thought were the backbone of a team that had been solid. Why can't they kind of bring in youngsters around those guys? And, some teams don't bottom out. And I thought with his coaching, with Vrabel's coaching, maybe they could do it that way. And I didn't think it was an unreasonable thing to try. In hindsight, didn't work at all.
I know you've done some shows, Paul Kuharsky podcast. Make sure you check them out on Paul Kuharsky's YouTube page, as well as paulkuharsky.com. And I did the show with Nick on Thursday, of course. All of this brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and some Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. But I Sam then responds with, but keeping Brinker is counter to that. So I do want to ask you about, so Callahan in his postgame, in his season-ending interview with you guys, sort of went on a kind of explained in pretty good detail about how collaborative everything's supposed to be. It's a group decision. You may disagree, you may agree, but then at the end of the day, it's a team decision, which is sort of just a business methodology in general. You sort of have to do that. How much do you think it is counter that? Because I still don't know, we still don't exactly know who was having final say. It was supposed to be Ran Carthon, but I've seen lots of people report that this was Brian Callahan said we were all in this together. We all made decisions together. Tavondre Sweat, J.C. Latham, Cushenberry, Pollard, Snead, whatever. We know Brinker was the one negotiating the deal with the Chiefs, even if it was Rand's idea. Where are you on? Can it just be one without the other, or do they have to be linked together in the bad record, the bad decisions, the regression of the franchise? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're clearly all linked together in the ultimate byproduct of their work, but they do have avenues that they're in. We were told that Carthon was the lead guy on personnel. I don't know how much Brinker was or was not there. The fact that he's making a phone call to me doesn't dictate that he's the one that made the decision on the move that a phone call is being made on. Now, it doesn't eliminate the possibility that he is either. There's too much haze here. And there was too much haze 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then they gave the personnel honcho title to someone, which I thought would clear it up. And so maybe I'm completely naive where I'm taking them somewhat at their word. And if you're going to pin things on someone, I'm going to tend to pin them on the person they told me is responsible for that thing. And so Carthon was responsible for personnel. Now, I think that Brinker is creating himself a thing here where he can have the most power and the least accountability. And I don't think that we should stand for that. Brinker has authority to decline or dismiss or overrule anything this new GM wants to do. And so when it comes to push and shove, he cannot point at the GM. He's got to point at himself. And we can't accept that GM stuff, which is why I'm somewhat amazed that if this is taken to the league, which it was by, is it James Jones of CBS? He got the league to tell him that they view this as the power position in the Titans front office, which is crazy to me. And this is what I talked to Brinker about when I had 10 minutes with him on the phone the day this whole thing went down. He said that coach and GM are the two most important spots on a team, and that this GM spot is the most important team in their front office. And I said, so you're telling me you don't want the most important position in the front office? Help me understand how you have risen to this rank and you don't want the most important spot in your area of the football team. And I still don't understand it. The only rationale for it is what I'm saying. He wants to avoid some decision-making thing. But the caveat is he's got the decision-making power, and it's very confusing and complicated.
It is, and I think so we could look at it two ways. I agree with you that is it possible to create a structure in a front office of an NFL team in 2025 because of all the things that you have to do that go beyond scouting and drafting and trading personnel specific stuff, that it's possible that someone needs to be over the top of all of that, and someone also needs to be in charge of personnel while knowing full well that the guy above you or the woman above you has final say on that stuff. I don't know if that's a way to build a structure in 2025. Is it possible? Maybe. It's certainly not traditional. And I think ultimately Ed says, we all asked, who was the person Amy could rely on for football decisions? Well, now it's Brinker. She has her czar for better or for worse. And it's hard not to look at that. You see these 10 different names come out instantaneously. My email box just boom, 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 boom. Completed interview. They flood the zone with a bunch of names that he's done all these interviews with. There's going to be another round of interviews, from what I understand, coming up at the end of this week with in-person interviews with these folks. And I don't know how many there'll be, 3 or 4. We'll get to some of the names later on, but I don't know how you don't hang everything now, including the evaluation of the head coach and the quarterback. I don't know how you don't hang it all on Chad Brinker now. I don't see why you wouldn't do that. I
don't see why you wouldn't either, but I think, if it goes bad, maybe we'll see Chad Brinker attempt to find a way. That's the only justification for claiming that this GM is so powerful and for selling it to the league as the most important job on the football side of the executive operation. Otherwise, why did they fight so hard to get it acknowledged that way, to get the best person they could in the building? Well, there are only 2 other general manager jobs open, right? Raiders and Jets. That's something that hasn't been made a big enough deal about. So this job is somewhat more attractive because for people looking to move right now, there are only 2 other places to go. And those aren't neat and tidy either. Jets head coach is probably going to have a lot of say. And Raiders head coach is probably going to have a lot of say. So here it's Brinker who's got a lot of say. Well, Brinker's in place and established, whether you like it or not. These 2 new head coaches are not going to be Mike Vrabel. One of them is probably going to be Ben Johnson, maybe in Las Vegas.
Well,
maybe in Las Vegas. And so you've got Tom Brady kind of acting as a power person too. So you could feel comfortable dealing with him, but the other places are not very orderly either.
QC says, if Amy wants a collaborative effort, stop forcing it and let it develop naturally. So they should have started from ground zero, fire all 3, hire the new president, and let them do their thing. Look, there's lots of people that agree
use
with that.
The word collaborative. I've not heard the word collaborative in all of this, right? The caveat, I've got final say on all football matters, has been mentioned numerous times. I've not heard the word collaborative or collaboration in Amy's statements, in what Brinker and Nihil said to Jim Wyatt in the initial round of stuff. And anywhere, correct me if I'm wrong, in Nihil or Brinker's comments to me, to Nick Suss, to Ron Davenport, and whoever else they spoke to. And it felt like an intentional avoidance of that.
And I think it was also intentionally the other direction. It was intentionally Chad Brinker has final say. It was intentionally, to me, it was clear. That being said, there's all this other extra stuff that makes it more complicated than just that. But it does feel, for all intents and purposes, for now, that fans should just say, Chad Brinker's in charge of this thing. Let's go. Let's go. All right. Anything else on I think that we certainly don't need to talk about the interview anymore. The Vrabel situation. So that brings us to Vrabel, by the way. Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Make sure you go to Sinkers Beverages, 4-time liquor store of the year. Of course, this is the 4-time champion. You can search Uber Eats and have the booze delivered directly to your house. Even if you're on dry January, you got the non-alc beverage, you got the non-alc beers, the non-alc wines, and of course the THC beverages, which are even healthier for you. All of that stuff can be delivered right from Sinker's Beverages, of course, to your house. Search Uber Eats or swing by the location right there on Gallatin Pike in Inglewood. It is a fantastic store. They got great experts. They take care of you guys. I promise you. I'm up there all the time. They got the allocations that they drop on Friday if you like bourbon like I do. And, of course, make sure you sign up for the In Crowd, which is their sort of rewards program. And if you're in that little group there, they'll take care of you. I promise. It's sort of like you're all 22, PK. It's sort of what it is. It's sort of like you're starting 22.
Like that concept a lot.
There you go.
Go to Superfast's comment here about Underwood.
All right. Superfast says, we need Steve Underwood to come out of retirement for 3 months to train a successor, then let his GM actually have the final say over personnel and let the coaches coach. It shouldn't be this hard.
Burke Nihill is Steve Underwood. He's been Steve Underwood since Steve Underwood retired. He took Steve Underwood's job. So a lack of Steve Underwood is not the problem, though Steve Underwood, I think, had some degree more football acumen because he was Bud's right-hand man, and Bud was more of I think it's fair to say Bud was more of a football man than Amy is a football woman, because Bud, founded the team and was involved in all this stuff for years and years and years, and Amy's relatively new at it still. But I think to say there's no Underwood here is wrong. Underwood, though, is Nihill, and Nihill now has a comparable person on the football side in Brinker.
And the most important role that Burke Nihill has played for this organization, he hit a grand slam, which is a really good stadium deal for the team. That is his job. And if his top job was to get a good deal passed through the Metro Council, through the mayor's office, through multiple mayor administrations, to get a contract and a deal done to approve the construction of a new stadium that should last the organization and increase the value, he has done as good a job. He might have done a better job at what he's supposed to do than any of these people we've talked about.
Yeah, with Adolfo Birch as his lieutenant on this, who also, and came from the NFL, had great NFL experience in terms of dealing with the politics of, a situation. And they got it done. And that's like you said, a home run, big deal.
Eddie says, why has Brinker not talked since these major moves? I don't mean talking to PK for 10 minutes. I mean a full presser in front of media. It's the same non-talking front office. I'm curious about this, PK, because they have not made any coaching changes, correct, right, at time of taping. So
no.
if they were to do that and make some coaching changes, wouldn't you in theory wait till after all of the dust has settled to then have a press conference? Is that fair?
I don't think he'll have a press conference, and this will be weird. He won't have a press conference until he's introducing a GM. And then the conversation will be the GM conversation.
Yeah.
It won't be the Brinker conversation. So in lieu of having a press conference, he had short conversations with several of us who covered the team, which is better in some ways and worse in some ways. But it's worse in terms of a broad array of questions. So several of us asked the same questions in short conversations, and it would have been more wide-ranging if it had been a press conference. We'll see what happens with the GM. I don't expect any coaching moves to be made until this GM thing's over. Not that the GM would necessarily have input into it, though he will have oversight of the coaching staff. But maybe he'd just have a cursory input into it at the end. But they're in no hurry on that front.
All right, so Mike Vrabel is hired, a lot of money for the New England Patriots.
What's the number reported?
What is it? 82? Was it 92? Let me double check on that. I'm pulling it up right now. But it was. He's also bringing Ryan Cowden with him, of course, into the organization. There's going to be supposedly collaboration with Elliot Wolf in the front office. We'll see about that.
It's dumb. I mean, as dumb as things are here, to not streamline that thing. Elliot Wolf was part of things gone bad. Now it's the first year of having somebody that wasn't Bill Belichick making upstairs decisions. But you've got leftover and new, and somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose.
I want to say this is Schefter, I believe, reported it. I still have not found the dollar figure yet, but it was a big number last time I saw it. So I'll see if I can dig for that for you guys. But look, this is not about like, well, who was right? Should they have fired Vrabel? Like, no, they shouldn't have sided with Ran over Vrabel. And we can debate this
So
from a Titans perspective. It's ridiculous, but he is going to come back to town. He is going to be back in town, and what we are dealing with now from the Titans perspective is a coach who has to get results right away. Fair or unfair, Brian Callahan has to get results right away. Chad Brinker needs to get results right away with whoever he hires and whatever it looks like. And wherever they put this Patriots game on the schedule, it is going to be a circus when he comes back to town next year.
Absolute circus. I would think you put it relatively, I don't know if you have any faith. Well, early.
Week
first month. Yeah. I don't want a week one because then the whole offseason becomes about that game. But first month before the Titans have a chance to disappear. And I don't know that New England will be great this year. I think they'll be improved. And they've got a quarterback. But keep in mind, while they finished a win better than the Titans, they lost to the Titans. So they've got some climbing to do.
What's interesting is they've got a lot of cap space. They've got a quarterback that people seem to think is the real deal. And he's building the farm. He's building the front office the way he sort of envisioned building it probably when he was here. He's got a great relationship with the owner obviously with Robert Kraft. Is this an organization you expect to do well quickly under Vrabel?
I'm not sure about quickly, but second season, I would expect them to be playoff competitive. Yeah.
So ridiculous. What I don't like is all the chatter on social media from last year, how pissed off everybody was. And it's partly because like I was the one who was like, guys, it's just, why is everybody so upset that he went up to see his old team during the bye week? Like, I don't understand. Like, I didn't think it was that
big issue with them.
I didn't think it was that big a deal. And of course, now here it is. They oust Gerard Mayo, and he's there, and he's assembling his team of people he wanted to hire here, and now he's doing it at a place that he clearly has a fond affinity for. And it's hard to blame him for any of this stuff. I mean, the way he was handled here and the way he was treated here, very differently.
Well, I think he would have been head coach there last year, but for the contract language that Gerard Mayo had in his contract, which was overly hopeful stuff by Robert Kraft. I do think the biggest question for Mike Vrabel, who I think is a good coach, is if he can overcome his ego in terms of the staff. And if we see familiar names like hire Tony Deuce, that guy's a good coach. But if you're going back to Jason Hoteling or Keith Carter or Todd Downing or Tim Kelly, that tells me that during your year away, you continue to think that you can make your guys work, and that'd be catastrophic potentially.
Yep. Josh says it just hurts knowing Vrabel was right about everything. I don't know if he was right about everything. Paul just
pointed right about a lot.
And Paul just pointed out one of the main things he still might be wrong about, which is how to build a staff. He did a great job with Matt LaFleur and Arthur Smith. And after that,
Matt LaFleur wasn't his. He really was John Robinson's, the same way that Denard Walker isn't really Denard Wilson. God, I'm still doing that way too much. Denard Wilson, apologies. The same way Denard Wilson isn't, really Brian Callahan's. He was really Ran Carthon's, which, to me makes his footing a little bit unsteady, but would make you want to move faster if you're making that big of a change to the staff, which makes me tend to believe he's safe.
King Carter says, what was wrong with Tim Kelly?
I mean, if you like that sort of offense, the ball doesn't move and there's no.
Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. I do appreciate all you folks jumping into the comment section. Thumbs up and notifications turned on the YouTube page. I do appreciate that. If you are listening to us via the podcast app, we do appreciate you there as well. Please, 5 stars on the review there. Scroll all the way to the bottom of your app of choice. And of course, make sure you hit retweet, share the product on that godforsaken sewer that is Elon Musk's application.
Arthur Smith was a good coordinator here. Mike Vrabel lucked into him, but was smart enough to recognize it and hire him. and he maximized what they have. I agree entirely, Sam. And, Pittsburgh went to hell this year, and there's big conversation going on up there. And I think Pittsburgh was limited in what they could do offensively also, but he's partly culpable for Pittsburgh losing 5 in a row and yet again failing to win a playoff football game.
Ed Henry says, Wolf, Vrabel, Cowden, who has final say? We aren't the only ones with the issue. So there you go. my guess is that Vrabel and Cowden will win that power struggle, and then you'll know who has final say, which is
they didn't just hire Vrabel for him to sit back and take what Elliot Wolf gives him.
Yep.
But look, I think in the big picture, we need to remember that generally speaking, and even Ran Carthon spoke to this, his job was to serve the head coach. And it's really dumb move by any general manager to give a head coach player he didn't want.
Yep. Hard to disagree. All right. So Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Somebody already mentioned this in the comments. I forgot to throw you up there, but can we talk about Jordan Love's contract? No, I do not want to talk about Jordan Love's contract. I would prefer him throw good passes at some point in playoff games.
It's really poor. No offensive solutions.
The Eagles are, I think he is one of the issues there. But that being said, you lose your top 3 receivers in the moment. It's difficult to finish up. And the Eagles are very, very good on defense. One of the best defenses in the NFL. You're on the road, but the quarterback's got to make plays when the receivers are open. That's got to be, that's what he has to. It's last two playoff games. Jordan Love has not been great. He was great against the Cowboys last year, and he struggled in the bad weather against a very good Niners team, and he struggled last night, and it was very disappointing for my 6 and 8-year-old. My 8-year-old in particular took it hard, Paul. She wasn't very happy at the end of it. So
learn pain. Learn pain.
Well, she's a Mets fan. She understands. Jordan Love is Will Levis with like twice the brain cells. Okay, let's not talk about brain cells. I think Jordan Love's good in a system. I think Matt LaFleur's system is very good. But I don't think Jordan Love is a guy that takes the rest of the team to this next level. Here's a question I had for you, actually, Paul. Because Callahan has said this, and I've been thinking a lot about it, that there's only a handful of guys, like 2 or 3, 4 guys maybe in the world that are the system, right? Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, maybe Lamar Jackson. I'm even watching Jalen Hurts. He's playing in a system that benefits him. Justin Herbert has excelled in a totally different system than he did in his first 3 years in the NFL. I'm watching Love, and I'm going, all right. Has the need for an extraordinarily skilled quarterback gone down in the NFL? Okay, let me rephrase that. You have to have somebody who plays well, but it feels like the benchmark, the bar for being a good quality starter has gotten lower. Does that make sense?
Well, it's only gotten lower because there's no choice. I mean, how many great ones are there? That number's, I think gotten lower. I don't know. Maybe the few premier ones has always been small, but I think then when you go from 4 to 15, I think that has gotten scrunched, and it's 4 to 8 or 4 to 10. And it's harder to get to 15 anymore. It's because of what's coming out of college, and because of how difficult it is to develop guys and how impatient everybody is to develop guys. So I would agree with that premise. But, I mean, right now, I think if you look at Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, I feel comfortable saying one of those guys probably winning the Super Bowl.
No, I agree. I'm looking at Sam Darnold with 13 or 14 wins, Jordan Love with 11 or 12 wins. Jaden Daniels, very talented. He's maybe the exception here. You got a lot of guys who are winning a lot of games, and because the systems are so good, and because the receivers are so good, and because the rules have all been bent to help a quarterback achieve success, and the quarterback is the one who gets the most reps starting at age like 10, because you can run 7-on-7 tournaments for your entire life, and those systems are largely what you're going to run in high school, college, and pro, that the bar for being a productive, maybe productive is the right word, the bar for being a productive quarterback feels lower than it has been in the past. But that doesn't mean you're good enough to win a championship, that you take the rest of your team and you are just outthinking the entire defense. The way Rodgers did in his heyday, or Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, or the way Mahomes does it. Allen is just a superior elite athlete. Like he just does things that other humans can't do.
Well, I think another part of it, at least in this year's sample size, has been bad teams going against bad teams. And so, if you're playing bad teams, I would take this out for Mahomes this year, say, because that he had two really good teams in his division, that you can't complain about the competition that Denver and the Chargers were putting up. But the Raiders, they're bottom feeders. And if you look at the bottom feeders around the league, I mean, we had more bad teams than ever, it felt like, right? I mean, look at the top of the draft here. You got 3-win, 4-win, 5-win teams. It seems like I haven't done the research, but
I think there were 9. I think there were 9 teams with 4 wins or less, and I think that was a record, a modern record.
That's a lot. And so some of these guys got some of those wins at the expense of teams that just weren't very good, that were easy to beat. So I think Jaden Daniels was great, but he also, got to play the Giants and the Cowboys, who were pretty miserable. And so I'm not saying these things were padded for some of these guys, but everybody's 14 wins included 3 against some real crap.
I think it's all like 4,000 yards is so different than it used to be, right? Like Geno Smith goes for 4,000 yards 2 years in a row. That's something that didn't happen in 1995 or whatever. Jonathan says this might be one of the more. The question is, I think more. Let me reread this. The question I think is more. Quote, is play calling more important than quarterback play? I don't think that is, but I think the systems have gotten really smart and really good. And when you have the Shanahans and McVays and the LaFleurs and all these guys everywhere, all over the league, I think they've gotten pretty good. The receiving talent, there is nobody in this league. This is what makes the Titans' need so interesting at receiver. How that even the bad teams have like an elite number 1 guy at receiver. There's so many good receivers.
Well, you need the quarterbacks executing the play calling, but the smart play calling understands what the quarterback can and cannot do. Now, I don't know if that applies so much to the elite guys. It applies to Sam Darnold. It applies to Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold's got some good people around him, some good receivers.
Great system.
Some good blockers, and that's a head coach who knows what he's doing.
QC says it's a good system. I assume talking about the Packers. That's why Willis looked like a capable quarterback for a couple of games. That tells you everything about the Shanahan system. I tend to agree. All right, do you want to talk about some of these names? I know there's a bunch of you guys in the comments that have a few other questions in there, and I'll see if I can find them out. But Reggie McKenzie, Miami senior personnel executive. Thomas Dimitrioff, former Atlanta GM, got to the Super Bowl. John Eric Sullivan, VP of player personnel for Green Bay. John Spytek, assistant GM, Tampa Bay. Mike Borgonzi, is that correct? Borgonzi, assistant GM, Kansas City. Ed Dodds, assistant GM, Indianapolis. Ian Cunningham, assistant GM, Chicago. Matt Berry, senior director of player personnel, Seattle. Catherine Hickman, assistant GM and VP of football ops in Cleveland. Terrence Gray, director of player personnel in Buffalo. They've conducted, I believe, 10 total or 11 total digital interviews. They will, of course, then conduct a second round with, I guess, the semifinalists of this particular search with Chad Brinker and team. I'm assuming, I always assumed it would be, look, this is people people you trust, people you worked with, right? Like that's most of these lists. And I'm assuming if they just announced it, you can go ahead and while I go check.
Rappaport's got 3 coming back for sure: Borgonzi, Spytek, and Cunningham. Cunningham, interestingly, is a guy who's on this list. He was in the mix for Ran Carthon's job. 2 years ago, he was a candidate for the Titans general manager job. Not that Chad Brinker was involved in that process. Chad Brinker was still working for the Packers front office at that time. But here he's piqued their interest again. Borgonzi has a friendship with Brinker. Snyder, I think the Seattle general manager worked in Green Bay and had some overlap with him way back. Look, you're getting somebody from Kansas City. That's he's been working at Brett Veach's right hand. That's some good stuff there. And so, I think all 3 of those candidates sound good to me. The one, not to single her out, and I think she's very interesting, Catherine Hickman, but her resume is much more administrative than it is football scouting at this point. And I think if she wants to go the general manager direction, she may need a few more years of a career turn towards more hardy scouting in order to be the kind of person that Chad Brinker's been describing, which is a all ball all the time. Yeah. Because it doesn't sound like she's been out on the road doing a lot of scouting when you read her biographical information.
So John Spytek, assistant GM Tampa Bay, Mike Borgonzi, assistant GM Kansas City, and Ian Cunningham, assistant GM Chicago. According to Ian Rappaport, we'll get second interviews. Adam Schefter 3 minutes ago reported that a second interview in Tennessee, Bills director of player personnel Terrence Gray is expected to get a second GM interview this week with the Titans per source. These are all, of course, these would be in person as well. I'd be surprised if John Eric Sullivan isn't in that group.
I would too.
As a Green Bay guy. So, look, I'm curious your thoughts on like the strategy of conducting so many at such a quick lightning speed pace. Is that normal? Is that unusual? What do you think?
I don't know what necessarily qualifies as normal. And I don't know how many people were involved in that, right? Like for Carthon, they had Todd Torricelli and the chief medical guy involved, and kind of a widespread. So it'll be interesting how big this opens up. I don't know who else was involved besides Brinker. I would presume at least Nihil involved in these initial conversations, which I get the feel were like 3 or 4 hours of Zoom. Because if you're doing 3 in one day, if you're doing 3-4 hour interviews, that's pretty hardy.
Yeah.
So you get
Tom Pelissero says Colts assistant GM Ed Dodds also is going to get a second interview per source as well from Tom Pelissero. So that's
4
5.
or 5.
That's 5. You think they're going to go 6 on a second round? I don't know.
That's half already. So that would be a lot.
Okay.
I don't know if they're going 6. Now it could be also, they could have wanted somebody back who declined to come back after discussing what the position is and everything. We don't know about that.
QC says want nothing from Indy. Chicago also. I hear really good things about Ian Cunningham, but I also understand going to Green Bay, Kansas City, and Buffalo, 3 premier franchises in the NFL right now. It's harder to sell Colts and Bears.
Yeah, but somebody could be really good
right.
at their job as a right-hand man to a Chris Ballard who has failed in the big picture. And it's not going to be because of his right-hand man. It could be in spite of his right-hand man, who's guided him in a way that he hasn't taken the advice. So you never know about something like that.
Is it wrong for me to devalue this search in general because of the conversation we just had about Chad Brinker? It is difficult for me. Like, I want to get into these guys, and when they get to, if they go to a third round and there's only 2 left or whatever, or they make a choice, we're going to dive into this person. We're going to get to know this person. We're going to study their moves, study the team, the way we studied Ran Carthon's moves at the back end of the draft for the Niners. We're going to get into all of that stuff. The question I have is, like, outside of just being good at it, and that's hard to prove other than when you get elevated and then you have more opportunity and responsibility. It's hard, I think, for fans to get excited about this. You're not hiring a true general manager. Am I wrong to not put as much weight onto this as you would normally?
No, I mean, I think that's about right. And I've been reluctant to do like specific pieces on everybody because everybody does them, and there's only so much information available on the people, and it gets redundant. I've tried to talk with people I know about these people. I did a little poll today talking to 4 personnel people I know about who they like the best or foresaw getting a job. Dimitrov did well in that, and he's not listed here as a second interviewee at this point. So it's kind of a hurry up and wait situation.
Yeah.
And that's all you can do. So I may write something for tomorrow that's not related to any of this. That's kind of digest this in the meantime kind of thing.
I think what's interesting also is because of the narrative around the news last week, And I think I know Tehran has reported that a few candidates have reached out to him and said, I don't want anything to do with that. There's absolutely people who are going to see what's going on, talk to people. Maybe they know Ran, and they're not going to want to be a part of the organization. It's also one of 32 for everything: quarterback, head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, GM, assistant GM, owner, etc. You are only one of 32. And as you move up in this league, the air gets real thin, and you always are going to look for opportunities. And that, I actually think you can find a good person no matter what's going on. You can hire a good coach, and you can hire good people in the front office, regardless of how you're viewed by some individuals around the league. I don't think you can still do your job and hire somebody good. I don't think that's an excuse here, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, you only have to find one. Now, we haven't seen Brinker hire outside of analytics people who are not forward facing and are not big decision makers, and they could be really good at their jobs or they could be really bad at their jobs. And we don't know. It doesn't impact anything that we see. So Brinker's a hard guy to judge in a lot of ways. People don't want to hear that because he's connected to what they've done. And I agree with that. Like, all of them are culpable, particularly for what's gone on in the last year. But in that regard, like, I think Brian Callahan deserves more than a year. And so I can understand the argument that Chad Brinker deserves more than a year. Also, like, I have the outside reporting that I've done, which was not all positive on Chad Brinker by any means, the same way it was vastly not positive about Ran Carthon. And then I take those experiences and I pair them with my personal interactions with the guys. Well, my personal interactions with Ran Carthon were not good. And I haven't been shy about saying that. And they were minimal. And I don't think anybody in local media in Nashville outside of Tehran Davenport had a relationship with Ran Carthon. Now, I've had some personal interactions with Chad Brinker, and based on those, I feel like I'm giving the guy a chance based on my own personal interactions with him. So based on what I've heard about him, some negative, some positive, and my personal dealings with him, hey, I give this guy a chance. Based on my stuff with Ran, I heard bad stuff coming in the door. I heard bad stuff from people who dealt with him. Not that he's all bad guy. Clearly, he's got some redeeming qualities. And then my personal interaction with him was bad. I had enough cause to be thumbs down there. And Callahan, the same. I heard good things about him coming in. I've heard mostly good things from people who work with him. The team has stood by him hard. And my personal interactions with him certainly have been very good.
Well, and yes. Ed says, if we think Brinker is setting himself up not to be the scapegoat, then why would he veto everything a GM wants to do? Wouldn't that put the bullseye on his back? I do think there's I have thought about this, that there's a chance he actually does hire someone, turns him loose, and then tries to step back from it.
The only reason I question that, and that makes perfect sense, is he didn't say in any of this stuff, I've got full power pertaining to everything football related, but I don't intend to be heavy-handed with it. Or I've got full power on all of this stuff, but I'm going to trust my people to do their stuff. And I don't think it's going to happen very often. I had this conversation with somebody connected to the team, but not connected to the football element, who was talking about, well, the head of X department has full authority, has authority to run that department. But in the end, Burke is the head of football, and whatever he or she does, if Burke comes in and says, no, we need to change this or that nobody questions that. That's the way a business works, and there are 4 or 5 people like that head departments. They have authority over their department, but ultimately Burke has to sign off on things. And this person was puzzled as to why this was such a big deal. And I was kind of explaining, well, in football, with the forward-facing thing and decisions on a number 1 overall draft pick or a big trade, people are used to, particularly in Nashville. It's been a very GM-centric town, and they want to know who that final decision maker is. And so if you're casting Brinker like Nihil, well, then Brinker is the decision maker, and the person under Brinker is not
Yeah.
the same. It's just not.
It's hard to find a way around not.
apples.
It's hard to find a way around not saying this is Chad Brinker's organization from a football standpoint. It's hard to do that. Sam says if they're drafting a rookie quarterback, does it extend everyone's leash? I would argue no, not if they're not good at football. If they draft a quarterback who's not good and it takes time for that player to develop over a long period of time, they're all done in the middle of the season, near the end of the year, whatever. Like I think by the end of next season, you need to know if Brian Callahan's the coach. You need to know if you've got a quarterback, and you need to know if Chad Brinker's good at his job. That's all. And being critical of one guy, Mike Vrabel, Ran Carthon, John Robinson, does not exclude criticism of the current people. They all are going to be treated the same way under a microscope and be given the exact same opportunity to fail or to sink or swim. And this is big boy stuff. This is not the playground in like 6th grade. Okay. So there you go. All right. Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, of course, open in Inglewood. In Madison, I should say. It's across Briley Parkway, but it's like 7 minutes from downtown. It's super, super easy and accessible. And they're open Wednesday through Sunday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. until the meat is gone. So there you go. All right. PK, what do you got coming up at paulkuharsky.com this week?
I think I had a look at, I know AJ Brown did not have a very big game for the Eagles against your Packers. But McLaurin still a big factor in the playoffs. AJ Brown's still going to be a big factor in the playoffs. It's time maybe to take a look at what these receivers, who all were at the same point that AJ Brown was with the Titans, have done since the Titans hit that crossroad. And so I think that's the next piece I'm gonna publish.
All right, there you go. I do appreciate all you guys in the comments for joining and hanging out. Appreciate PK, paulkuharsky.com, of course. Make sure you check out all the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network. I had a long conversation with Sam Phelan of A to Z Sports on Friday about Mike Keith, about being on Survivor and how it helped him manage all this palace intrigue with the Tennessee Titans. He got very philosophical with me, so really good conversation, about an hour on Lamestream Sports. That'll be up on the YouTube page this week as well, so you can watch it or you can listen. Go check that out. You got the Hot Read podcast, Paul Kuharsky podcast. I'll have Thursday, myself and Nick Suss, and we've got lots of other great shows. Music City Audible, Gold Standard covering the Preds, SEC Football Live covering SEC with the National Championship coming up on Monday. So lots of good stuff across the network. So make sure you stay tuned and please give us the thumbs up, the subscription, all that great stuff. We do appreciate it. Otherwise, for Paul, I'm Braden. For Sinkers and Shotgun Willies, we do appreciate you guys for hanging out. We'll talk to you next time. Peace and love.
Cheers.